Hello, hi, how are you? This is Coach Aaron Saft and the Running is Life podcast. Today, I actually grappled with the title of this episode as we draw in here on almost 400 episodes, which is just bizarre to me. I walked into the space where I usually record, and I remember building this during COVID and starting to record, during COVID in 2020. So I'm going to call this one Ruminations of a Coach, because that's what it feels like. I've been having a lot of ruminations lately, a lot of thoughts. And this is just some observations, and I'm going to talk about the story of what brought this about as I get into this episode, because being a coach can be tough. It can be real tough. It's demanding at times, challenging. It can be stressful, and there's all different levels of coaching, and I'm grateful, beyond grateful for the opportunity to just coach the many different levels that I do. High school, we're about to leave for the state championships. We have 20 athletes competing in the state championships from our high school. I'm so proud of our team. Very proud of my athletes. We went 5 for 5 at Hellbender this year. All 5 of the runners that lined up at Hellbender all finished. Just so many cool things that I'm a part of, that I get to witness, observe, be a part of, and I'm grateful for those opportunities. So these are some thoughts that I had, because I almost called this the weight of coaching, but I didn't feel that brought about the connotation that I'm looking for, that draws almost a negative connotation, almost a negative thought when you hear that. There is some weight to coaching. Again, I'm going to talk about the story that brought this about, and that's part of that weight, but there's so many positives, and that's, some of the things that I just mentioned. So cool. So, I remember taking an RRCA course. I think it was level 1, and they had a whole chapter on the hats that we wear as coaches. The many roles that coaches have, because we are absolutely our first and foremost role is to coach, is to provide training and feedback. But that comes with so many secondary and tertiary and beyond roles within it, because we provide an ear to listen. We're here to hear about it all, right? Like what the day brought about, how bad it was, the birth of a child, the death of a loved one. Everything, divorce, separation, the good and the bad. We hear it all as coaches. And that's tough. We're going to talk about that line here in a moment, but we also, we hear about injuries, and, we try to give them resources and tools to go about properly addressing weaknesses and injuries, and depending on the coach and their level of certification, knowledge, education, background, it's that's how much help they can provide, and that's a really fine line of staying in our lane, we call it, right, and being able to know when it's outside of your bounds, when it's outside of your ability, of your knowledge set to help a runner. And that's difficult. That's super difficult. When I was younger, I used to try to correct form. I used to tell them, you have this, then do this, whatever it was, Achilles tendonitis, whatever, and almost, diagnosing, which was far beyond my scope, far beyond my knowledge base, far beyond anything I should have been doing as a coach. That was on me, I didn't think anything of it, but as I matured, as I learned, what was my set, what was my boundary, what could I help with, how far could I go, before I need to really refer to professionals, and that that line it moved more and more back. It regressed, if you will. It can't, it was at one point, like I said, like I felt like I could diagnose, right? But that's not what I can do. That's not in my skill set. So it became, we don't know what's going on. You should see your primary care physician, orthopedic, a PT, whoever it may be that can give us that diagnosis, right? Or once they had the diagnosis, then what's the treatment, right? That's still not in my skill set. That's more for a physical therapist. So realizing these things and being able to take that step back and say, that's best left for the professional whose job that is, right? And that's a lot of times we see coaches stepping beyond that. And some are physical therapists, and that's right within their skill set, which is awesome. But, again, as coaches, we have to be very careful about what we do, what we say, and how far we go, right? Because we want the best for the athlete. And if it's beyond our skill set, we're not doing what's best for the athlete. We need to refer them out. Although we'd love to keep it in-house and not let them have to spend more money, right? It's just better for the athlete in the long run. And that's the name of the game. And, also setting those professional and personal boundaries. I love my athletes. I love all of them, and they know that. And I will, be there, tried and true, in their time of need, to listen, to be an ear, to give a hug to my high school athletes, a side hug. I have to limit my personal boundaries, because a lot of these kids, they look up to me. I'm not going to say as a father figure. They look up to me as a leader, as as a strong male figure in their life, right? And I have to respect that and understand what's professional and what's personal, and that can be a really fine line as well as with my adult athletes, because these are my peers, right? These are people that are my age, right? Doing some of the same things that I am. We're running in the same circle, but I have to remember my role as a coach, right? If we go out for a run, then, we're just two runners. And if they have questions about training and stuff, sure, I can put my coach hat on and talk about it, right? But again, being able to define those boundaries and give them resources, right? Like if we're talking about mental skill set, mental tools, I can provide books. Sure, I can say, hey, you should check out this book. But if it goes deeper than that, if it's something that's really a detriment, it's a hindrance in their performance because of a mental block or a mental obstacle, then who do I refer them to, right? Like we need to find a mental sports performance coach, a sports psychologist, whoever it may be. I need to learn how to direct them to those people so that they can get the help they need. So, again, finding my boundaries, right? So it's tough. It really is tough, because sometimes you may have the personal experience, right? Like you've been through the same exact thing and you know exactly what you did, but again, it's not your place, right? And that's what I have the hardest time with, social media, and people on there are saying, hey, I think I have this. What do I do? And all these people chime in, well, this is what I did. This is what you should do. And they have no professional background to legitimately tell that person what to do. And so we have to be careful. That's all the message that I'm trying to send. Like the people that are writing those messages, you need to be careful. The people that are asking for that help, seek the right help. Right? Seek the professional help that you need to remedy this, because you're going to get so many different answers from so many different people. You don't know where to begin, right? You're going to be overwhelmed by responses. And some of those responses, if you try, may not be the right response. It could get you injured worse. So we have to be super careful about what we do, how we perceive things, what we ask to the general public, instead of asking the right questions to the specific and proper channels, right? So just like I said, my only word there is be careful what you do and what you ask online, because you may be overwhelmed by response and you may not get the right responses. Seek the right help. My next bullet point that I'll talk about is stress and learning time management. This is something that my mental sports performance coach, Marissa Romeo, helped me with and made me realize. That's why I had to take a break from the podcast for a little bit, because I had to reset. I had to really define what was important to me. What did I really need to get done, right? And so I had to take a step back from many things and say, in my life, what are my priorities, right? So we talk often about priorities and making sure that we prioritize what's most important, right? And that's a difficult thing in and of itself as well. And when it came down to it, I realized that my family was first and foremost, right? I had to do my work, right? My coaching, right? That's something I have to do. And then tertiary, it's my running, right? Like I want to get my running in. So oftentimes anything else gets pushed. Like I'm recording this here on Thursday. This will come out on Friday. I've got to get ready to go to the state meet here. So I'm squeezing it in. I even thought about recording it at the hotel tonight, but I didn't want to be stressed the rest of the day thinking I had to get this done. But oftentimes things get pushed because you have to take care of those other things first. So I had to learn time management skills. I had to really, kind of take a step back and say, what do I need to get done today? Where can I get it, fit in? It's not easy. Like, a lot of times, like, you'll see like my runs are kind of early to mid morning, and that's the time I have to get out there and get my run in. Today, I lifted while my wife was dropping my daughter off at school. She came home and she did the first 3 miles of my 15 with me, right? So I got to run with my wife, see her before I left for this trip. And now I've got my lift done and 15 miles in for the day. Here I am recording the podcast. I'll get ready to go. I've got a few athlete calls. So I had to prioritize again and make sure that everything that I needed to get done had a time and a slot for it to be done. And that's tough because oftentimes when we don't think about what needs to be done, that's when our stress elevates. That's when our anxiety takes over because we're like, oh my God, how am I ever going to get all of this done? Right? And that's when we need to take a step back. And again, what's the priorities? What do I really need to get done today? Okay. And with that said, let's start making a plan for how I can do that. Right. And I've oftentimes used my calendar to kind of list out the things and times where I can do them just so I can spatially see them. I can visually see what time slots I have and where I can get things done. Right. Where are my gaps that I can fill in with these other things that I need to do? And that's tough. That is real tough, but it's worth it. If you have that plan the day before for the next day and you can just, wake up, look at your calendar and just kind of execute, right? It's the only time that I will say when it becomes rote, when you are like checking off boxes for things you enjoy, and that includes running, that you need to really take a step back and reanalyze and say, okay, the point of running is to enjoy it, right? I'm not enjoying it because I'm just checking it off because I'm just trying to get one more thing done. And that was, again, is when we have to say, okay, I need to reshuffle and say, what's going on in my life that's taking up time that I don't need, right? For me, it's scrolling on my phone, watching TV, these things, like they're great. They're great to relax and do. We need that relaxation. But oftentimes I need to say, okay, I don't have that time today to do that, right? I don't have time to scroll on social media. I don't have time to watch TV. I need to focus on doing X, Y, and Z, right? So, but again, we have to strike a balance because, a lot of us need to run, right? But we also need to relax. So we need to find that time where we can unwind. It's hard when you're working all the way through. Like last night, we had a lot going on. We've been shifting all sorts of things around just to make sure things fit in and are done. We had a family dinner, and And I got home and I still had to check in on my athletes. I still had to make my post for my adult athletes for the week so that they had all the information for next week. So I had these things that I had to get done. And, I was kind of sitting there working on my computer. We had the TV on in the background, to kind of try to unwind, but I really didn't have a lot of time to just take a breath and unwind. And that was hard. That's one of those nights where it's just difficult to unwind, and they happen, right? Because you have to get things done. But I woke up this morning, felt much better because I didn't have to do all of those things that I finished last night. I could, lift, go run, and just be present and enjoy those things because the other things I had taken care of. So today was much better because I took care of those things, spent a little extra time last night doing it. Didn't get quite that relaxation time, but I enjoyed this morning. I was able to relax, able to enjoy the lift and the run, which, it's a lot of times it's like squeezing things in. So find a balance. Some days have to be let's just take a step back, enjoy this, be present for this, right? So find that balance for yourself. The other thing that I noticed is my accessibility. I am very open to all my athletes. They can message me. We have a call schedule, and that took me a while to realize I needed to have a call schedule and say, if you need a call, set up the time. And if you don't see a time that's available, that's, good for you, let me know and we'll figure out a time that works for both of us. But that really changed my life because, other times we were just kind of fitting in calls all the way throughout the day, and that just stressed me out. For some reason, phone calls stress me out. So having a call schedule, being prepared for a block of time where I know I'm just going to engage on phone calls and Zoom conversations, it really helped to make my communication with my athletes much better. Because I was present for the phone calls. I knew, this block of time, that's what it was set for. Whereas, other times I may have been like more scatterbrained because, I'm just getting done with practice and I'm hopping right on a phone call. I was not as present and engaged as I should have been. And that's why this call schedule has changed it. It's a game changer because I know what times are better for me for calls so I can be present. I can give, the most engaged conversation that I can. So, having that accessibility, but limiting that to say, hey, this is when I can accept calls. You can message me any other time and I promise to answer it as soon as I can. It may be a delay due to this or that, but, they know my schedule. They know when I'm at high school practice, right? They know if it's in the evening and they message me late at night, I'm probably not going to respond till the next morning, right? I give expectations so they understand. How am I going to communicate? When am I going to communicate? I usually check in on Training Peak once a day. They know that. So if they've already had a comment for me, they may not see another comment until the next day. So I do check in once a day there. They know that. That's the consistency, right? So they know the expectations for communication. And that's a big thing is knowing these communications and what is best for you, right? And when you communicate with others, email can overrun us. And, I typically check email twice a day. Some people say they have a specific time they check email. I usually check it once in the morning and once in the evening, sometimes midday before practice. But, I want to make sure that I'm not missing anything within my email. My communications with my athletes, I use an app, a communication app called Sports U, and basically they connect with me on there, and it's just like text messaging me. So if I'm available to answer it, I answer it right away, just like a text message. If there's going to be a delay, I'll give them a response at least. And hey, I'm at practice right now. I can't check on that. When I get home and onto my computer, I'll get back with you, right? So I let them know at least. So just expressing how we're going to communicate and with what consistency and how frequently. That's huge especially for accessibility because we want to be accessible to others, but we have to set boundaries, right? So it's kind of like having office hours. I'm also one for setting the example, right? I don't try to knock anybody, not any runner, not any coach. Right? This is just me. So when I say this, I mean no slight to anybody else. But my belief is that I have to do it in order to understand what it's like for the athlete. that makes it easier for me to be, more not only compassionate, but understanding of what's the workout going to, do to them? How's it going to feel? How will they recover from it? What's the race like? How does that effort feel, right? The half marathon that I just did, great reminder, right? Hadn't done a half marathon in some time. Marathon as well, right? So doing these things just so I can remember what they're like, right? What's the experience like for the athlete? And so when they're kind of going through it, I can see that. I understand that. And then when they have questions about races, I can be more present and more engaged because, maybe I experienced that race. Or like some of my athletes, I've had athletes in the past that have done that very race, and I connect them. I'm saying, hey, this athlete has done that race. If you have specific questions, connect with her. Okay, talk to her and ask her questions about it. So, there's a lot of different things there, but I believe I have to set an example for them, right? Like, we can do these things. Like I did with the Everesting, right? Like these things are possible. Is it for everybody? Everesting's not for everybody. No, it's, that's not the point. It's that we can continue to do these things, right? We can continue no matter what the challenge may be. As I get older here, I kind of thought about, I had an athlete yesterday that was talking about training and trying to be patient with building fitness and pace and such. And that's tough. Like I remember just it seems like yesterday when like my average pace was probably about a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes faster than it is right now. And it wasn't yesterday. It was quite a few years ago, but I can remember that. Right. And that's hard because what you used to be able to do, but now that I'm almost 50, that's totally different. Right. And being present and accepting of what you can do today, right? That's really tough. I have a lot of athletes that have young kids, and I've experienced that. Like I know what that's like to try to juggle your schedule, their schedule, get your run in, maybe run with them, right? Like it's difficult. That's a hard ask. So I mean, being an example also means that you have understood, you've been in their shoes, and you can be compassionate about it. You can talk about what worked for you. You can ask them what's working for them, what's not working for them, right? So having these conversations, you have a better understanding of what's going on and how to help. So, not only that, but you can share your knowledge and experience. Right? Like, I mean, I've got a lot of experiences and we talk about them all the time. I bring those experiences in and talk about them with the athletes and, my knowledge set. Just had a conversation. It was just posted on social media. I spoke with Miriam Saloom of the Runner's Mechanic about breathing, right? And breathing while we run. We had a great conversation. It's posted on my socials if you want to check it out. But there's just so much to this sport. And that's why I have all these ruminations. That's why we have these podcasts where I take deep dives into, all these different topics, right? There's a lot of solo episodes because I want to share so much, share this, the experiences that I have and the knowledge that I have with all of you so that you can bring it into yours. So, that's the big thing is really, is being able to share all of that. I love that aspect of this. There's quite a few things that, oftentimes coaches, even athletes, can have imposter syndrome. And we feel like, perhaps we're not doing the best job or we're not helping the athlete, right? Is the training working? That's the big thing. And that's what we want to make sure that the training is working for the athlete. But oftentimes, it's like, we compare ourselves to others, and that's the difficult thing. We see what others are doing on Strava, or we see what other races other people are doing. We see how they're training, and, we question, right? Like, am I really a runner? Am I really a coach? Right? Like, am I doing the right thing? And then we see the results, right? And that kind of helps, determine. And sometimes it's a negative because, it didn't turn out the way that we had hoped. And that's hard. That's really hard. And that's what, oftentimes where you get that really big imposter syndrome is when things don't work. And that's really hard to kind of, grasp, because, the methodologies that you're used to working somehow failed us. And that's not fun, but it does happen, and that's really, really difficult to deal with. So, but again, using the metrics to make sure the training's working, that's the biggest thing that we can do, and make sure that we're doing our best, for the athletes and for those around us. So, this next one, this is kind of what spurred the episode. One of my athletes, Mike Reardon, I had just run with Mike just a few weekends back, and Mike was doing Cocodona. Mike's been on the podcast and talked about Cocodona in the past. This was Mike's third Cocodona 250. For those of you that aren't familiar with Cocodona is in Arizona. It's 250 miles throughout the desert. Beautiful course. Aravaipa race, great. Just a great race, very popular. And there was an unfortunate death in the race after the first night. That was my fear of Hellbender. And if I'm honest, that's why I let go of Hellbender, because I was afraid that someone was going to get seriously injured or worse. And I don't think I could have lived with that. And that's why I let go of Hellbender. Somebody died during Cocodona. My athlete Mike's tracker wasn't working, and oh my God, I texted Mike just to say, hey, are you okay? Like, everything going okay? You're still moving? Because again, the tracker wasn't working. I heard about this death, so your mind starts thinking the worst, and I was basically freaking out, worried that Mike had been this athlete because his was one of the only trackers that wasn't working. So I was beside myself with fear and anxiety that Mike had passed. This is, it's really difficult to relive, because I can't tell you how upset I was, because I really thought that Mike had passed. So just like I said, I was not in a good place. Finally, I had waited long enough for what I felt was long enough. I'd been a few hours since I texted him, and no response. So I called him. To my relief, Mike answered. I had woken him up. I felt so bad that I'd woken him up, but also so relieved to hear his voice. He was alive. Oh my God. So, I tell you this story just to understand that when we get involved with athletes as coaches, it becomes a deeper understanding and commitment to this person. I've been working with Mike for over 3 years now. I've gotten to know Mike. As I said, I got to run with him just before Cocodona. You become a part of this person's life, right? He becomes a part of mine. And there's a level of engagement there that, as human beings, we make this connection to one another. And to think that a life was extinguished, that's hard enough, that any life was extinguished during a race. But to have a life that you were a part of, that is really hard to grapple with. It's the same when somebody gets, not the same, but it's a similar feeling when one of my athletes get injured. I get super upset because I know that's a big part of their life, right? That they're upset because they can't run. Like, it's, something that's been taken away from them that they enjoy. So injuries they're huge to me. And in my last episode, I said how, Nathan said, I'm here for my athletes' longevity and their health and well-being. I want to make sure that I do everything I can to try to keep them healthy. Now I know that's not easy. We're a sport of repetition, and that repetition can often lead to injury, especially if there's something even on the small side of a hitch in the form. And I can't always see that, right? Because I don't run with my athletes all the time. A lot of times this is just virtual. I don't even get to see them run. So, I'm doing everything in my power, though, to make sure that their schedules have everything they need to not get hurt. So this is really a big thing for my high schoolers, cross country. That's a difficult sport. It really is. When I was growing up, they used to say it had the most injuries out of any sport. I don't know if that's still true these days, but I want to keep my kids as healthy as possible. These athletes, I don't want to see them get injured through any repetition, overuse injury. So I do my best for all my athletes to not. And like I said, thank God Mike was okay. My heart goes out to the family of the person that did pass. I can't imagine, and man, it's difficult when we hear about these things. So, sending my love and regards to the family of that runner. When I talk about these things, there is a lot of anxiety, a lot of nervousness on my end. We all have the pre-race nerves, right? We all get nervous before a race. I get nervous for my athletes, right? Like for what they're about to take on. Last Friday was our state qualifier meet, and I was beyond myself. I was so nervous for these kids. We had worked so hard all season, and it all comes down to one given day, right? To one day, one opportunity to qualify, and there's nothing more I can do at that point, and that's all I could tell myself. I've got him here. I've got him as healthy and fit as possible. It's up to them. I've given them every mental and physical tool I can think of. It's up to them at this point. And as I said, 20 athletes qualified. I mean, I'm so proud of the team. I'm so proud of these kids. But yeah, it's not easy to sit there and wait and see, especially what happened was the top 4 qualify in each event. That's the automatic qualifiers. So, but then there were 4 at-large spots taken from the next 4 best marks in each event across the state. There's 2 other regions. So we had to wait. We raced on Friday, but the other 2 regions didn't race until Saturday. So for some of my squad, we had to wait until after the meets were done on Saturday and just keep scouring the internet for results until they finally popped up. And one of my boys texted me that our 4x8 had just made the state championships by 1 second. The first team out was 1 second behind us, but we were the last team in by 1 second. And it doesn't matter. I don't care. The kids ran a season best of over 16 seconds in the 4x8. A huge improvement on our best from the season. So I'm just so happy for them that they got to go. I've got 2 freshmen, a junior and a senior on the squad. And just to have this opportunity for these kids, I'm just so grateful and so joyed. My daughter qualified as a at-large bid in the 800, and our 4x4, the girls 4x4, also qualified. So she'll run both events. So just like I said, it was great, but the pre-race anxiety, just waiting and the anticipation of finding out if they qualified, it's just tough. It's hard, it's really hard. And even during, I like watching her race because there's nothing I can do. I can kind of yell out some feedback of what she needs to do, but it's up to her to jump on it and do what she needs to do. And she raced against some great girls in that 800, and she almost got that 4th spot, almost did, but took the 5th spot, and we just had to wait to find out. And thank God she got in. Whoa. And processing results. So after the race is done, kind of processing how it went. there's races that go great, and there's races that go awful, and we have to talk about each of them. And oftentimes, I'll say, hey, let's set up a call. We'll talk before the race, of course. I've got a few conversations today of people that are getting ready for their races. But afterwards, we kind of process it. I give them a little time to think about it. I send a form and say, hey, fill this out, send it back. Just kind of makes you think on it, think through it, what went right, what went wrong, what could we have done better, But having those conversations is super important, and anybody should do those things. Post-race is kind of, how did things go? Positives, negatives, things you can improve on, all of those things. Kind of talk through them, right? Even if it's with yourself. But we talk through them, and that's huge. We talk about the races and how they went and how they were executed. Even with my kids, we talk about the races and how they executed them, what they did right, what they did wrong. All super important for their growth and betterment in this sport. So yeah, processing results is huge. And then from that, we grow, we learn, right? That's the next step, is that growth and learning process. They have to, understand that, with making these slight changes or drastic changes, whatever it may be, they're going to have, a better results moving forward. So that's part of my role as well, is to, help them through that. I will say, coaching my daughter can be difficult. And at the beginning of this year, we really had to have a conversation. She was a freshman this year. So coming up here to the high school, joining the high school team, she was our number 2 on cross country. And I had to remind her, hey, when we get to practice time, when it hits 3:15 p.m., I need you to understand, I got my coaching hat on. I'll always be your dad, and I will always love and support you. But you have to understand that when it's 3:15 to the end of practice, I'm coach. Yeah, you can still call me dad. That's fine. But you have to treat me as you would your other coaches. And that can be very difficult. And she's done very well with that. But sometimes she goofs off we always do when we're just home. And it's okay. Like I said, I'm always going to be her dad. But that role is quite difficult. Keegan did really well with it. And understanding dad versus coach. And he still, calls me up and asks me questions about everything. Dad questions, coach questions. So it's difficult coaching your own kids. But if they understand the difference in the roles and how to respect each, it's so much easier. Oh, yeah. So I'm going to close with, I really truly believe this is what I was meant to do, to be a part of these athletes' lives. And I just enjoy the heck out of it. As I've said a million times, I love doing what I do. I feel more fulfilled than I have in, any job that I've ever had. Coaching, not only at the high school level, but, my adults, being a part of their life, being a part of their running journey. It's just one of the most wonderful things in the world. So I surely appreciate, you guys listening through these ruminations, and hearing about them. If you're a coach, I hope it kind of helps you start to think about some things perhaps differently. If you're an athlete and looking for a coach, again, look for someone that's going to match, what you're looking to do. Who has the experiences you're looking for? Who has the communication skill set that you're looking for? Who has the roles that you're looking for? Are you looking for someone that can help you with your diet? That, then you need a coach that's also a dietitian. Are you looking to beat an injury cycle? So look for a coach that's also a physical therapist, right? So finding that right match is massive. And if you want to have a conversation about coaching, as always, reach out to me. Happy to do so. I love what I do. I coach every distance. So happy to have the conversation, be it marathon and under or ultra. So thank you all for listening and being a part of the podcast as always. Love to all. I hope that you have a great weekend. We'll catch up again next week. Until then, keep moving forward, my friends. Running is life.